Earlier you spoke about this being hell. If there was a hell, this would be hell.
Yeah.
So heaven,
Heaven.
if we can touch on that. So, I know for me, being a seeker, heaven would be more, and you talk about everything being on a sliding scale. Heaven for me would be more like ending the birth, death, life cycle. Um, you know, the illumined worlds, things like that. But for some, heaven may be just learning to navigate this life, so that it's not hell.
Right.
So can you speak to that? And I feel like there'll be multiple levels for people depending on
hmm
where they're at
hmm
as far as what would heaven be.
Sure. So heaven is a concept, right? A concept born out of a polarized mind. So it has to start there. What is heaven? And just as my awareness when I was young was that hell was a state of mind, right? Or what I would term now a state of consciousness, the same would be true of heaven. So again, I have to take it back to when I was young. When I was young, what I knew, and no one told me. I was raised in a Christian faith, but no one told me this. But what I knew was that God was here. This was God, right? That's all I knew. And I never saw God as a person. I always just saw God as energy, like light, brilliant light. And that impersonal, brilliant light existed right here. So whenever I wanted to feel at one with God, I just right here. Okay, not many kids hold that, right? But many do. And a lot of people who would probably listen to me are people who would have probably held that understanding when they were young. Now, maybe it got kind of pushed out of them from the teachings that they then went through. But somewhere in there, most people who are ready for this level of work had that understanding or something close to it when they were young. So heaven is literally, it's not a location, just like hell isn't a location, because there's nowhere to go. I mean, at a certain point, you wake up. They don't call it awakening for nothing. At a certain point, you wake up to the full-on realization, remembering, I will say, that there is nowhere to go. This is it. This is it. It doesn't mean that this world is all that exists. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is your point of focus is right here, and that doesn't move, right? It doesn't move. There's nowhere for it to go. Your point of focus is your point of focus. So whether you are in heaven or hell depends purely on your state of consciousness and your level of perception. So at a level of perception that the polarized mind is capable of, there's only a certain, dynamic that it's capable of witnessing. However, outside of that and a non-polarized state of consciousness, the levels, if you wanted to term it that, are just ever expanding, ever evolving, and infinite, absolutely infinite. So there would be no, in the death process, people go to the astral realm, and in the astral realm, they'll think they're in heaven because it seems so much more beautiful, and they can experience, they don't have this time lag between what they conceptualize and what seems to appear before them, like there is here on Earth. And they get stuck very quickly thinking, oh, like I've arrived. And the point is, there's really no point of arrival if you are an ever evolving aspect of the divine. So it's constantly about continuing to move and grow and move and grow. And it's all about experience. So within that, the concept of heaven, you couldn't possibly contain it to any thought, right? How could it be? Heaven is the state of consciousness that knows itself to be God and experiences everything to be that, right? And within that, there's anything you could ever dream up is existent in that, and everything you can't, because it's beyond the scope of a polarized mind, exists in that space. And it would all be considered heaven, the way that our personal concept of heaven exists. Is there a heaven for people who are just stuck in a polarized state of consciousness? Sure. But what they realize when they get there is that they still have to come back, right? So yeah, you got to the thing, you will most likely, in your physical transition, you'll most likely be met by that being that you associate with God, because for most it is a person. So maybe you're met by Jesus, and maybe you're met by the Buddha, and maybe you're met by Allah, or the Great Spirit, or whatever it is. And you are allowed the time to, you have your life review, and like you have all these things that you will experience. But you also understand that your work is not done, right? That you do have to come back, because until your karma is balanced, you are stuck here. So even the concept of heaven, once there, where you can see from a broader perspective, you realize that even that was limited. So always better to let go of any expectation. That's one of the things that seekers do have to learn along the way. You don't realize how much expectation is built into everything in your world. You have so many expectations that you aren't even aware of. And this would be one of them. What is your expectation of heaven? And what I'm saying to you is you got to drop it all. Expect nothing. Expect nothing, and that way you can allow for everything. Yeah. As soon as you have an expectation for something, you've already limited it. And what I'm telling you is that you have no limit. And so to put any expectation on anything, even if it's a beautiful concept, you're still limiting it to what you're capable of intellectualizing right now. And that's, why do that to yourself? If you can experience your own limitlessness, why would you limit yourself? Yeah.
So then, note to other seekers that are trying to break the birth, death, life cycle. Drop that, because you limit yourself.
Note to self, drop your expectations.
All right.